Hello, on Sunday evening, March the 27th. My name is Gardner, and I appreciate you stopping by and hope you hang around for a little while, perhaps the whole time I'm commenting, as I'm going to go ahead, as I mentioned in the comments that below, that I've been thinking about doing this for a long time, and for one reason after another, I haven't, and so tonight I am. This being just commenting on some things in the world of politics, society, education, religion, etc., because I want to try to facilitate a constructive discussion regarding the different issues. So often, I've spent a whole lot of time myself looking at different productions that emphasize one perspective over the other. I've been pleasantly surprised at how many good productions there are, even if they are clearly emphasizing one position over the other. But I like to have a platform that kind of brings varied ideas to the table and tries to clarify what exactly is going on with some of these issues and how we might think about them, not just to identify with one camp or another, although my personal ideas will become evident as we move forward, I'm sure. But in order to move forward together as a community, as people, as we seek to understand even what we as people are, how we identify as communities, et cetera, et cetera. So I am going to try to just comment on a few things this evening. I'm going to try to do this at least once a week on Sunday, maybe more often as time goes forward. Perhaps at some point I'll be able to find a way to present and talk in such a way that people will find supporting me in this effort worthwhile, and I'll get that Patreon or some kind of an account set up in order to do this more often. Or this may be just something I do and watch reruns of to have at least one view every few weeks going forward. But we'll see how things take off. But I do appreciate your time. As I mentioned in the disclaimer, I'm just going to go ahead and get started because I've used lots of excuses to not do anything as I've tried to do something both with this and with writing over the last year and still have not put anything out there. So here I am. Looks like perhaps from what I can see, some bad lighting and other things that I know I need to work on. Having watched many videos, or at least several videos on how to do this, I still have a lot to do with just the nuts and bolts of it. So I look forward to your comments on that, constructive criticism with respect to how I can make this presentation more effective and engaging you and others in the discussion and in the follow-up to these presentations. I hope to, or I want to, I tend to make the time to hopefully look at your comments. I say hopefully because I hope you have some comments that you'll provide to me, both about the formatting, and hopefully those I will be able to take care of as we move forward, but then the topics themselves and facilitate a discussion here. So, long and short of it is, this evening I'm going to get started. Still a lot of things in flux in my life over the next few months, so it'll be a while before I'm able to get perhaps on a more steady pattern. Set a time to log in if you want to watch or comment live, or just know when something else is out there. And I believe there will be a subscribe button that you can subscribe and will give you automatic notifications. But frankly, I'm still learning how a lot of this works. But a couple of things I wanted to comment on tonight, and just to try to kind of set the stage for some issues as we're in an election year. Is in the context of world religions and Christianity, we're in the season of Lent and leading up to Easter, and just to try to think about how we engage with the world. Now, I am a conservative, basically a conservative viewpoints. I've always described myself, or often described myself anyway, as personally conservative but politically liberal with respect to what I think the state, the governing structures, authorities should do with respect to dictating or determining what individuals do. And yet, I think individuals have a responsibility then to make good decisions about what to do and how to do it, how to live life, not only as individuals, but as individuals in relationship with others. As Aristotle said, we're all political animals, and Well, I tend to, and have spent honestly way too much time in isolation, I guess, for lack of a better term, tend to spend time alone thinking about things. It's constructive when we learn how to engage in discussion constructively. That's the only way to function as a society, I think, effectively, particularly a democratic society. And that ability to discuss and agree to disagree is something that perhaps throughout the history of politics has never been what it ought to be or what we idealize it to have been in the past compared to today. I've read some things that suggest that the rancor and bitterness that we have today is probably not a whole lot different than in the past. One of the main differences is we now are on a 24/7 cycle, and we are in a cycle or a context where everything that somebody says or does can instantly be put out to the public and become the thing by which people are identified, rather than looking at the broader context of their positions, their discussions, et cetera, et cetera. We tend not to allow each other to make mistakes, um, to I guess speak without thinking. And we expect every statement to be the final definitive statement on a position, rather than recognizing that we all have limited information. Some of us, the limits are much wider than others, but we all have limited information. And if we don't learn how to agree to disagree and engage in context or in discussions with those with whom we probably do disagree and may continue to disagree, then we're cutting ourselves off from an important source of information from different perspectives that can help us see an even broader picture. I don't think, as some may, that every perspective is right, and everybody ought to be able to uh, live as they want to with respect to individual choices. I mean, I think there are right and wrong choices that we can make, but I am much more liberal in trying to define or mandate how those choices ought to be made than many with whom I agree when it comes to the principles, the points, the conclusions. Where I disagree, perhaps sometimes, is on the process. And one of the things that I tend to disagree with rather strongly is the process, the context, the degree to which conservatives in general, even Christians and those with religious identities that I would tend to agree with more than others, have contributed to a lack of civility, a context in which discourse has been made more problematic. And I think part of that is just the nature of the times and the fact that in 24/7 news cycles with literally hundreds, if not thousands, of channels and sources of information, that it's easier to, and you get clicks by having the controversial statements or the statements that can be made presented as controversial. I think a lot of times we hype things way out of proportion when we're trying to analyze or describe or discuss what somebody said. And that, again, compromises the ability to recognize that, hey, we may not be as far apart on issues as we are made to appear to be, in order for somebody, right, left, whatever, to get a following, to get attention. And so, and that is, again, is another topic that we can talk about down the way. Um, but one of my big concerns going into this election season is the failure to be able to discuss with each other when we have differences of opinion what our reasons for those differences might be that lead to the conclusions about which we disagree. Now, often we debate the conclusions without thinking about the reasons for which those conclusions are drawn, and that's where our real disagreement probably lies. If we can address those issues, then either we may find we actually do agree, one of us may need to change our mind, or we may both agree to disagree while recognizing that the differences that are suggested by the conclusions are not nearly so great as they are when we actually look at the reasons for those conclusions. And the second thing is that I want to emphasize, I guess, this evening and kind of my opening ramble is the degree to which the conservative viewpoint, conservative perspective, uh, Christian perspective, with which I primarily or I identify, um, has contributed to the difficulty in addressing issues. I think there are a lot of issues that I want to talk about as we go forward. Where again, in order to try to distinguish or try to identify for whatever motivation, this is where I stand. You're wrong. Um, we do that in such a way that we fail to facilitate a context in which actual discussion can take place. Now, as I alluded to earlier, there are several people that I've encountered, writers, thinkers, news people, etc., who have helped me to think about things in ways that I hadn't thought before. Some of whom I agree with, some of whom I disagree with. Some of them consistently do so in a way that I find constructive with respect to dialogue and engagement and being able to try to wrestle through these ideas. Others of whom I think often have good ideas, but they still present them in such a way or in a context that I find um, discouraging or discourages constructive dialogue. And so, as you share with me and with others who might read comments that you provide and discuss these issues, we may have reason to, or I will try to put out different sources, and I hope you will too, of information, different perspectives, particularly some those who are able to have discussions with people who think differently from them in a way where we are better able to grasp, comprehend, see the bigger picture from each perspective, both the one we may agree with and the one we may disagree with. So I guess one of the main things there is just the loss of civility in discussion and how we may or may not be contributing to that loss and what the consequences of that loss are. And so that's one of the things that I want to particularly address going forward. And one of the things I'll just mention, one of the topics I'd like some feedback on is as we think about how politics is practiced today, particularly at the national level, it seems to me like we've entered a phase, and maybe we've always been there, but we've entered a phase, or we are in a phase anyway, where elections in part are about gaining a majority in Congress so that one side can start investigating what the other side has been doing. And the issues that are important when one party is in power all of a sudden fade to the background when the other party comes to power and they've got their own laundry list of issues that they want to investigate, et cetera, et cetera. It seems to me that for the most part, all these investigations are benefiting only the lawyers and those people involved in carrying out those investigations, the politicians who are getting elected on the promise of launching these investigations, with often a failure to actually accomplish anything approaching justice or an objective conclusion regarding the facts and information that have been determined in coming to a conclusion. And so I wonder, given all that has to be done or ought to be being done with respect to, for example, getting a budget out on time, which the government hasn't done for decades now, let alone a balanced budget. I wonder if we need to entertain the idea somehow of, I don't want to create too many more bureaus or anything. Don't really want to create any more, but I'd like to see some effective bureaus, even if we have to create them from scratch. But it's some kind of an oversight bureau or committee and some kind of requirements where if you're elected to Congress, one of the things that you do, or the presidency, or anything in that level, perhaps even other departments, cabinet level, et cetera, we eliminate all these ethical concerns after the fact and just say, going in, you've got to go through an audit of some sort to make sure that there are no compromising issues as defined. Hopefully we get past, and I'll tip my hat on one issue. Hopefully we get past this stock trading of stocks issue that's coming up, which seems to have bipartisan support, except from some leaders, with respect to banning Congress from trading in stock, Congress and family members, immediate family members, etc. But creating a third party, or maybe a party out of the judicial department, the degree to which it's been politicized is a problem, but a non-political, nonpartisan oversight committee, so that whether it's a Republican or a Democrat or an independent who is thought to have acted improperly relative to the laws that govern congressional behavior, that group looks at the accusation, looks at the claims, and analyzes them, and comes to a decision, not because the person under investigation or the persons launching the complaint are Republican or Democrat or independent or whatever, but just because they're a congressperson who needs to be held accountable. And that we would have some consistency no matter which party is in control of Congress, the presidency, etc. We would have consistency with respect to holding all Congress people accountable for what they're doing in office. Well, I've run a little bit over the time. I want to keep these preferably around 10 minutes, no longer than 15. But I've gone a little over as I kind of rambled in the introduction, which is one of my problems, rambling, and the other problem is chasing rabbits. But I'm going to put this out there. I need to get started and see if, frankly, see if this is something that you all will join me in with respect to considering what people have to say about topics that matter, both from perspective of individuals, as a society, as faith traditions, etc. So thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time. Look forward to reading your comments. I will get back as quickly as I can with respect to responding to those comments and getting them posted so others can see them. And I will try to plan on being back next week, Sunday. I guess I'm going to try to do this on Sunday afternoons at first, and try to work in some kind of a schedule as best I can, and then maybe add a couple of other days, a couple of other specific topics along the way. So thank you very much. I hope everything goes well for you this week. Catch you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.